This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanya.
And I'm Talia.
And we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi Talia.
Hey, Tanya.
How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
Me too, I guess.
I need some true crime.
Well, I am here to deliver that.
Thank you.
Before I start with today's episode, I would just like to thank everyone for joining us again. And also, if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe or follow button on whatever app you listen to us on. One more thing before we start. This story was suggested by one of our members / Patreons. It was suggested by Sherry V.
Thank you, Sherry.
And with that, I'm going to tell you a story today that takes place in 1977 in Wylie, Texas.
Ooh, Texas.
Texas. Candy Montgomery and her husband, Pat, lived in their dream house in the country. Wylie at the time was a small community with a church and a little red schoolhouse that the kids went to. The church itself was just an unassuming building. It was white clapboard. It had peeling paint. It was set back from the road.
I can totally envision this.
I know. I'm gonna paint the picture. It's on a little bit of an incline, and it's surrounded by wheat fields on 3 sides and a farm-to-market road on the final side. So can you picture this just out in the country?
Sounds like something that would be in a scary movie.
It does, you're
Right?
right. Right, like a standalone
Church.
Candy
In Texas.
In Texas. Candy and Pat were very involved in the church, as were many others in the community. As a matter of fact, the church is where Candy first met Betty Gore, and they became close friends.
Candy and Betty.
Candy and Betty. Both women had small children, and both had husbands who worked in the big city, Dallas, where many of the husbands in the community worked. They had jobs like computer analysts, engineers, tech kind of jobs.
So you're so old school right now. The men are working in the big city and the women are
Yep, that's exactly what it
going
was
to their
like.
little white church.
It's exactly what it was in 1977 Wylie, Texas. At least for these ladies. Betty had married her husband Allan in 1970, and soon afterward, they moved to the Dallas suburbs. At the time, Allan worked for Rockwell International, which was a major defense contractor for the U.S. government. Betty was a pretty woman, and she had a big Hollywood smile. She was a popular girl in her hometown of Norwich, Kansas.
Oh, she's from Kansas.
Yeah, doesn't it just seem like apple pie American?
Yeah, I know. That's what's going on right now in my mind.
She met Allan in college where he was her math professor.
Oh.
I'm not sure of the age difference, but he was old enough to be her math professor.
I don't think that's appropriate these days.
Maybe not these days. Well, it was college. She is an adult, but still. She's very young.
There's that power play.
Right. When they decided to get married, her friends and family were surprised because they just couldn't see what she saw in Allan. He was shy, and his shyness came across sometimes as snobbiness or aloof. And physically, he was shorter in stature, wore horn-rimmed glasses, and had a receding hairline.
To each their own.
Right. In 1976, Betty took a position as an elementary school teacher in Wylie.
Of course she did. She probably worked at the Sunday school, too.
I'm sure she did. But despite a promising start at her job, she started to really dislike it. I'm not sure why.
I can think of a few reasons.
Children?
Yep.
God bless teachers. I could not do that job. The Gores already had a child together, a daughter they named Elisa, and by 1978, Betty thought it was time for them to expand their family. However, Betty and Allan's marriage wasn't exactly perfect. Allan traveled a lot for work, and Betty hated to be left alone during his business trips. Their sex life was almost non-existent, and while Betty broached the subject of having another baby, she also told Allan she wanted to time the pregnancy so that the new baby would be born during the school summer break, so she wouldn't have to take any time off of work. This wasn't exactly an exciting prospect for Allan, because not only is their sex life kind of non-existent, now it's timed, like there's a deadline, right? This was all in Allan's mind one evening after choir practice when he was getting into his car in the church parking lot. Betty wasn't in the choir, but Candy Montgomery was. As Allan got into his car, Candy went over to the passenger side and opened the car door. She leaned into the car and told him she wanted to talk about something that had been on her mind lately. Like, hey, would you have time sometime in the future? She broached it where she was looking to talk at a later date. But he said he was available right now. So she explained she'd been thinking a lot about Allan in the past few weeks, and she was really attracted to him.
That's what she told him?
That's what she told him, and she said, I just wanted you to know.
Oh, okay.
She wasn't looking at him as she expressed her feelings, and once she was done with her little recitation, she got out of the car and left, not waiting for Allan to respond to anything she said.
That is so strange. She knows his wife, Betty.
Mm-hmm. The feelings that 28-year-old Candy was having about Allan started during a church volleyball game in the late summer of 1978. Both Candy and Allan had tried to play the ball at the same time and ended up bumping into one another.
Oh, snap.
Neither one was hurt over the collision, but in that moment...
Sparks flew?
Yes, Candy noticed him. Specifically, she remembers how sexy he smelled. She was like, oh, this is a nice-smelling guy.
Okay.
I know, okay. Candy was unhappy sexually in her marriage to Pat and had been talking about having an affair to friends of hers outside of the church.
So she's looking.
She's looking. She is hot on the trail. She wanted fireworks, is how she described it. She wanted that to supplement the boring life she had with Pat. After noticing Allan, Candy started to wonder about him. Like, is he the guy that could deliver the fireworks I'm looking for? I mean, he's got this receding hairline. His clothes are really conservative.
Horn-rimmed glasses.
I know, but she liked him socially. By then, they had been friends through the church for about 9 months. He seemed to be someone like her. He was active in the church, loved kids. He had an outgoing personality.
Those are the qualities you're looking for when you want to have an affair?
Girl,
someone active in the church who likes kids?
I know, I don't know, right? Right. He had an outgoing personality with the church, and he seemed to be someone that was like her, like married to the quiet one. Candy had seemingly picked up on something between her and Allan. He teased her about her volleyball skills, talked to her after choir practice, sometimes standing in the parking lot together just a little longer than the other members. Candy sometimes doubted whether Allan was subtly flirting with her or if he was just trying to be friendly. But after fantasizing about sex with him, she decided she's just going to have to say something and see if he was interested in her like she was interested in him. So that's where you get her getting into his car and saying, hey, I really like you a lot, and leaving.
Wow. Damn.
I know. After Candy left his car, Allan was a little shocked. He felt flattered and couldn't believe another woman was interested in him sexually. I know.
Okay.
He let his mind wander and felt excitement because Candy was one of the more attractive women in the church congregation, and she was fun. He let doubt settle in his mind when he realized that maybe Candy was just flirting with him because she didn't come out and say, like, hey, let's have an affair or something like that. She just told him she'd been thinking about him. Now that the seed was planted, however, Allan thought a lot about Candy in the days after her awkward car confession.
Seemed like there was some innuendos going on.
I do think so.
I mean...
Why would you say it?
Right.
We're not in 6th grade.
Right.
Candy was what Betty wasn't. Outgoing, active, and fun. Or at least in Allan's mind. A week after the choir practice, Candy and Allan ran into one another at the end of another church volleyball game. Allan and Candy had stayed behind after the game to straighten up the gym, and after they were done, they walked out to the parking lot together. When they got to her car, Allan asked her, well, what did you have in mind?
Oh.
Candy said, get in the car, let's talk. Point blank and without mincing any words, Candy asked, would you be interested in having an affair?
Is that how it works?
Oh, no.
Just ask somebody you
It's
want an
very
affair?
clinical.
Yes,
I don't know.
Sound very passionate.
I know. Allan wasn't sure what to say. He told her he loved Betty and he didn't want to hurt her. Candy agreed with Allan in that she loved Pat and didn't want to hurt him either. Betty was newly pregnant, and Allan had such mixed feelings. He had never been in this situation before. Before he left her car, Allan kissed Candy lightly on her lips and left. They kind of left the conversation open. Allan didn't say yes or no to Candy. Allan was the type of guy who believed that marriage was forever, and when his sex life with Betty became a little mundane, he tried to find a reasonable reason for it. He no longer traveled for his job because he knew that Betty hated when he was gone from the house overnight. He also knew that Betty was stressed out due to her job and often came home with papers to grade that took her most of the evening to do. In order to help them reconnect, Allan had approached Betty about completing a program called Marriage Encounters that some of their friends from church had completed.
Marriage Encounters?
Yes. The friends that had completed it raved about how it helped their marriages, and Allan trusted the opinion of one of the husbands that had gone through it. Allan approached Betty carefully about giving Marriage Encounters a try, but Betty didn't exactly have a positive reaction to it. And when she questioned him on whether he believed something was wrong in their relationship, he backtracked and dropped the subject.
She's pregnant, right?
Yes.
Sounds like they've had a few marriage encounters.
Well, you remember? They were planning it.
Wink, wink.
After leaving Allan in the parking lot after that volleyball game where she asked him if he wanted to have an affair, Candy thought about her life. She and Pat had met and married in the early 70s and had a son and a daughter. Pat worked as an electrical engineer at Texas Instruments and made about $70,000 a year, which back then was huge money.
Yeah, it was.
Pat provided enough financially that Candy was able to stay home and take care of their children, but she was bored with her life. She craved a little excitement, as I mentioned, and on the morning of her 29th birthday, she received a telephone call from Allan, much to her surprise. He told her that he had to go to McKinney, into town, I guess, is what McKinney was for them, the following day to get some tires on his car checked. He asked her if she wanted to meet with him to talk.
To talk.
Candy accepted the invitation, especially since about 3 weeks had passed since she posed the whole affair question to him, and with every passing day, she felt more and more foolish and embarrassed over his apparent rejection. She was confused because he had kissed her before he left her car, so when he called, she was elated. The pair met in McKinney the following day, and Allan gave her a birthday card right away. The cover of the card read, quote, "For the last of the red-hot lovers," end quote. And when she opened it, Candy found a tiny plastic bag filled with red-hot candies inside.
Oh, stop it.
Your face says it all.
So ridiculous. He's so clever.
Oh, I know. Candy absolutely loved the card.
Of course she did.
I know. She really liked cheesy, cutesy cards and was immediately touched that Allan had remembered her birthday. They got into Candy's car and drove to a tea house to have a light lunch where they talked about everything except having an affair for over an hour. After they ate and were enjoying their coffee, Allan finally broached the subject. He said again he'd never had an affair before, and he couldn't forgive himself if Betty ever found out. Candy talked about how she felt the same about Pat. They talked further, but they made no further plans. I'm going to tell you, this really goes by very slowly.
The relationship, the
getting it started. Like, they talk about it, and then they don't talk for a while. They talk about it, nobody makes any kind of decisions, and they don't see each other for several days, and then they talk about it again.
I like how he's not conflicted as long as Betty doesn't know.
Right?
But he could never forgive himself if she found out.
If she found out.
Not if he did it.
Right.
If she found out.
I know, right? A week later, Allan called Candy again, but again, nothing further was planned. However, over the following month, Candy and Allan came up with plans and rules for their affair. It was ridiculously planned every step of the way. Like, talk about clinical and not spontaneous or...
This is the least passionate affair I've ever heard of.
I was going to say it's the least exciting thing I've ever read. Like, she wants excitement, and there's nothing exciting about this. Allan had freedom at work to take long lunches, and Candy had freedom due to Pat being at work all day. Candy was getting frustrated because she felt like Allan was being indecisive, and she started to waver on whether she even wanted to do this at all. Finally, Candy decided to invite Allan to her home for lunch, and that if the affair didn't move forward after the lunch, she was going to stop and let it go.
What were the rules they set up for each other?
Oh, I'm going to tell you. These are some fucking amazing rules. When Allan walked into the house, he was immediately confronted with a giant piece of butcher paper hanging in the room. There's 2 columns, one that said whys, and the other one said why nots. So pros and cons of why they should have an affair. They're going to make a fucking pros and cons list of why they should have an affair, or why not.
In her house.
In her house. Despite talking everything over again, no final decisions were made. That was finally done a few days later when Allan called Candy and said he decided to move forward. Candy and Allan came up with the ground rules. So here they are. If either of them ever wanted to end the affair for whatever reason, it would end. No questions asked. If either one became too emotionally involved, the affair would end. If they ever started taking risks that shouldn't be taken, the affair would end. All expenses, food, motel rooms, gasoline, would be shared equally. Apparently, they're going to be tracking mileage, right?
That's crazy.
Gasoline. They would meet only on weekdays while their spouses were at work. Candy would be in charge of fixing lunch on the days they met.
What?
So that they could... Yeah, so they could have more time. They figured they would need all of Allan's 2-hour lunch. Candy would be in charge of getting the motel room for the same reason. God forbid he takes 10 minutes to get the room. They would meet on a Tuesday or a Thursday once every 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
That was because Candy was free only on days when her little boy attended the play day preschool at Allan Methodist Church. She took him every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 2, but she figured she would need 3 or 4 hours of those school days for all the other errands and church and school duties in her hectic schedule. So those were the rules. Okay.
That's so insane. I know. I'm shaking my head here.
Right. They were finally ready to go for it and agreed to meet on December 12, 1978. That morning, Candy dropped her daughter off at elementary school and her son off at preschool. Afterward, she went home and cooked a special lunch for Allan and her. Get a load of this. It's not sandwiches and chips, okay? It consisted of marinated chicken, lettuce salad with cherry tomatoes and bacon bits, Thousand Island dressing, white wine, and cheesecake for dessert.
Wow. That's impressive.
She packed the lunch in a picnic basket along with a tablecloth.
And went to a motel room to go fuck this guy.
Yes. She packed a nightgown and underwear and drove to Richardson looking for a motel close to where Allan worked.
She needed some fresh underwear.
Maybe for the ride home.
Okay.
She checked into the Continental Inn and called Allan. Allan told her he'd be there in a few minutes. While she waited for Allan, Candy unpacked their lunch and changed into something sexier. It was a light pink negligee that was almost completely sheer, but not quite. It showed off her body, but still hid enough of what she was insecure about. For the first time, Candy grew nervous and wondered if she really wanted to go through with this. Girl, this is not the time to back out.
I would bust open that bottle of wine. Start chugging it.
I know. Allan was having some of the same feelings, but he drove to the motel anyway. Any second thoughts either of them felt went away when Candy opened the door to the room and invited Allan inside. They had lunch first. And when it was time to get down to business, Candy realized Allan wasn't as experienced as she had hoped. And actually, Allan had only ever had sex with Betty.
Yeah, but I mean, you can only have sex with one person and be experienced.
But apparently Allan wasn't.
He's boring is what you're telling me.
Yeah, and when she kissed him, she also realized he had never French kissed anyone before.
What?
I know.
What?
Yes.
What's he
That's
doing
what
with Betty?
I said when I read it.
What's he doing with Betty?
Apparently
What are
not
they
French
doing?
kissing her.
Can
you imagine?
I'm so confused. I'm so confused, Tanya. Okay, I'm with you, though. I'm staying with this. I'm sorry. Candy really picked a dud, man.
Right.
Like, all the people.
I know, and she wants fireworks, and this ain't it, girl. Anyway, Allan felt like Candy was so exciting, and he had never been with a woman like her. I mean, whoa, she French kissed him, right? Before leaving the motel, they both took showers and thought about their next encounter. 2 weeks later, instead of meeting at the Continental Inn, Candy checked them into the Como Motel because it was $6 cheaper.
Just trying to be
Got a
practical.
budget, you know? While the Continental wasn't exactly luxurious, the Como, compared to it, was definitely cheap looking. But Candy and Allan didn't seem to mind, and they continued to see each other for the next several months at the Como. Candy continued to bring homemade gourmet lunches with her that she would spend pretty much all morning preparing. And she would even leave little things on Allan's car whenever she had to go to Richardson to run errands. Sometimes it would be like cookies she baked, or brownies, or a little note, or whatever. By February, Candy was having second thoughts about continuing their affair. She told Allan during their next date at the Como that she felt like she was getting in too deep and explained that she was beginning to have feelings for him, and she didn't want to go too far. She didn't want to get to the point where she was in love with him. He didn't want to end the affair, as you can imagine, and so he reassured her that he wasn't going to let things get too serious, and he felt like they needed to let their relationship run its course. Allan was successful in talking Candy out of ending things with him. Allan didn't think he could fall in love with Candy, but at that point, he needed her in his life. Additionally, they were going to get a little break from each other soon when Candy and Pat would go on vacation to Georgia to visit family. Any misgivings either of them had while Candy was in Georgia fell away at their next meeting. They missed each other, and as they sat in the Como Motel, they caught up each other on what was going on in their lives. Allan talking a lot about Betty and her pregnancy. She was 7 months along now. After their meeting, though, even though she had missed him, Candy had doubts again. Sex wasn't great with Allan, or at least the fireworks were gone for her. Also, in early June, Allan told Candy that they should put their affair on hold because when Betty gave birth, she was going to need him more. Candy was relieved and agreed it would probably be for the best. The last time they had been at the Como, they talked so much that the sex just seemed obligatory, and Candy was getting tired of all the cooking she did for their dates, as well as the fact that Allan seemed to expect the little gift she left for him on his car. It was becoming just another chore for Candy. Candy started to feel guilt over her affair with Allan.
Oh, now she is.
Yeah. Pat seemed to be completely unaware of what was going on between his wife and Allan. Candy wondered if Betty was also oblivious, so she decided to throw a dinner for the choir that was also going to be a baby shower for Betty.
What?
Yeah.
I thought you just said she was feeling guilty.
She was.
And now she's gonna, to me, that's almost passive aggressive.
She wanted to find out, does anybody have an idea? And so that way she's going to get Betty in the same room with her. And same with Pat. Does anybody have an idea that her and Allan are banging? Candy did a gauge of everyone while at the baby shower. No one seemed to suspect a thing, and no one seemed to be uncomfortable. Betty was absolutely thrilled with the shower and enjoyed herself. Before I tell you more, we're going to take a break. Betty gave birth to the Gores' second daughter, Bethany, in July 1979. Betty and Allan enjoyed the closeness that babies seemed to bring to couples, but that soon wore off, and Candy and Allan rekindled their affair. Allan thought their first meeting back together was lackluster. Now he's even thinking,
this is getting boring.
And there was something different about Candy. Allan felt something else for the first time, guilt. He thought about Betty home with the girls by herself, and he started to feel shitty, especially when he remembered how close he and Betty got that first week after Bethany's birth. When Betty felt well enough to travel, they took the new baby to visit Betty's parents in Kansas. The Gores were supposed to come home on a Thursday, and Candy and Allan had planned to meet the next day after the Gores returned to Texas. But they arrived home much later on Thursday than expected, and Betty begged Allan to stay home with her on Friday. He had to contact Candy to cancel their date, and he made up some excuse about the church to Betty, like that was the reason why he had to call Candy. He ended up staying on the phone a few more minutes than he should have, because when he hung up and went into the bedroom where Betty was, she said, "Gee, that sure was a long conversation." That was the end of that. The week after the call, Candy was in Kansas with Pat visiting their family, and the following Friday, she met with Allan at the Como. When Allan got home that night after meeting with Candy, Betty actually approached him for sex, and she never did that. Allan and Betty hadn't had sex since Bethany had been born, and like I said, Betty just never initiated it. The Gores probably only had sex about once a month, and Allan was taken aback over how aggressive Betty was that evening. I'm wondering if she has some kind of idea.
Right.
Allan rejected her, so he wasn't up for it, so to speak, and told Betty he just didn't feel like it. Betty cried over the rejection, feeling embarrassed and humiliated.
I mean, she's finally being proactive about it and
right.
Then gets rejected.
And gets rejected. I mean, imagine how that feels, right? She immediately was convinced that Allan didn't love her anymore, that he didn't find her attractive after she gained weight in the pregnancy. Allan assured her that wasn't why, but she wasn't convinced. The following Monday, Allan called Candy and told her they needed to talk. When they met for lunch, Allan told Candy what had happened and how upset Betty had been. He told her he wanted to end the affair. He explained to Candy that the affair was affecting his marriage and that he really needed to get his marriage back together.
Surprise. The affair is affecting his marriage.
Yeah, we never thought that would happen. Give me a break. This upset Candy, considering she tried to end it months earlier, and Allan told her they needed to see their affair through.
Well, Candy needs to see rule number 1.
She does. Rule number 1 says, if one of you wants to end it, then it ends. She brought this up to Allan, and Allan, being the indecisive man as he is, backpedaled and said he didn't say he definitely wanted to end it, but that they should think about it. They left the question up in the air, and over the next few weeks, they didn't meet at the Como, but talked on the phone. Candy grew colder with each call and was hurt that Allan had no regard for her feelings. She told Allan she loved him.
Oh, snap.
I know, and
that's another rule.
That's a rule. No. I think that was rule number 2. And he told her they were getting too close. He said he was afraid he didn't love Betty anymore, and that just wasn't right. I mean, it's an emotional affair. Not only is it sexual, it's also emotional. And I think that's probably even worse sometimes.
Right.
After Betty was rebuffed by Allan that night that I mentioned, she went into a depression that lasted several weeks. She complained of soreness in her neck and shoulders and sudden pains. School resumed in September, and Betty's doctor believed that most of Betty's pain was caused by stress, but he prescribed her pain medication to help alleviate the symptoms. Later in September, Allan quit his job at Rockwell International and joined a much smaller company that had better benefits and room for growth. Allan told Candy that he wouldn't be able to see her as much because the new job was different. Like, he had that 2-hour lunch at Rockwell, and he was getting new responsibilities and duties at his new job, so he wouldn't have as much time to see her. Candy felt like the affair was ending and asked Allan to meet one more time. He agreed. They met at the Como, had less than stellar sex, and talked about how they would be able to move on from the affair. Candy was having second thoughts about wanting to end it.
These people are driving me nuts with their
driving me nuts, dude. I know, this whole story just drove me crazy. Because Candy had grown to enjoy the attention she was getting from Allan. At their next meeting, they didn't meet at the Como and instead had lunch. Allan told Candy that Betty wanted to go to marriage encounters with him, and he thought that would be a great idea. He had to give their marriage a fighting chance.
So prior, he had asked Betty, and she said no, and now she is the one initiating going to marriage encounters.
Yes.
Is that a therapy thing?
Yeah, it's like a group therapy, like, weekend. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. Candy told Allan that she believed that marriage encounters would mean the end of the affair. But Allan said, let's just wait and see. He's just kind of wishy-washy, I feel. However, marriage encounters did wonders for the Gores' marriage. I mean, they had an amazing weekend, as it's described in the sources I consulted for this podcast. There was 2 really great articles that I will have links to. And there was also some other articles and things that I read, but a couple of them went really in depth as far as what they did at marriage encounters. It was a lot of, initially there'd be group therapy, and then the couples would go back to their room and they had homework that they would have to work on, like answering a question, and they would discuss their answers with one another. So they managed to connect, and they grew closer that weekend.
It sounds like the movie Couples Retreat. That's what I'm envisioning.
I saw that one too.
That's what I see.
Yeah, it was probably a lot like that, only without the comedy. When Allan and Betty returned home, they received phone calls from other couples who also successfully completed marriage encounters, welcoming them to the Flame Group. It stood for Keep the Flame Burning. So they had this Flame Group of couples that had regular meetings. Before going home, they made a stop at Candy and Pat's home to pick up baby Bethany, because Candy was babysitting the baby all weekend.
Stop it.
Isn't that weird?
That's just wrong.
It's just weird. I don't know how Allan thought that was okay. Betty waited in the car while Allan went to the door and Candy answered. She asked him how marriage encounters went, and he said it was really good. He didn't have an answer, though, when Candy asked him what that meant to them. The following week, Candy and Allan met again for a picnic lunch, and Allan did most of the talking. He told Candy about marriage encounters, and he wanted to fully devote himself to Betty and their family. He couldn't directly say he wanted to break up, but Candy understood. She had finally had enough of it, and she told him it seemed like he was leaving the decision up to her. So she said she decided they would end it. She wouldn't call him anymore, bother him, or try to see him. They both cried a little and knew that it was the end of their affair. Not long after that conversation, Candy and Pat attended a marriage encounters weekend, and while they enjoyed it, it wasn't the same earth-shattering experience that Betty and Allan had. However, by the summer of 1980, they seemed more content with their lives than they had been in a while. Candy and Pat. On the morning of Friday, June 13th, 1980.
Friday the 13th.
Candy went over to Betty's house to pick up a bathing suit for Betty and Allan's older daughter, Elisa.
Why do I feel like this story is going to take a very dark turn?
Because we haven't taken a dark turn yet.
That's right.
I've just been telling about these 2 people having this affair. But it was an important part of the story, and you'll see why. Betty wasn't expecting Candy until noon. But it was earlier then they agreed. So Betty was surprised to hear Candy knocking on the door that morning.
And she came by for what reason again?
She was picking up a bathing suit for Alisa. Now I'll tell you, the children were at the church at Bible school, and it's summertime. And Alisa had swim lessons after Bible school, as did Candy's children. So Candy thought, I'm going to come and pick up Alisa's bathing suit. That way Betty wouldn't have to come to the church to drop it off, because I'll tell you a little bit more, but Alisa's going to end up spending the night with Candy's family. Betty had just put Bethany down for a nap, and she hurried to the door so Candy's knock wouldn't wake the baby. Candy told Betty that the children wanted to invite Alisa to see The Empire Strikes Back with them that evening, and so she was offering to take Alisa to her swim lesson at the church with her children to save Betty that extra trip. Betty said it'd be okay and invited Candy inside. Alisa and the other kids were currently at Bible school, as I mentioned, and after inviting Candy inside, Betty asked Candy if she'd like a cup of coffee, which Candy declined. She asked Betty where Bethany was, and Betty told her that the baby was down for her nap, and Candy was like, oh darn, I wanted to play with her. Betty seemed anxious to Candy, which almost like she wanted Candy to leave.
But then she invited her for a cup of coffee.
I know, isn't that weird? Betty reminded Candy that Alisa didn't like to put her face in the water, and that when she did, they rewarded her with peppermint candy. So she's like, I'm going to give you some of this peppermint candy to take with you. The women chatted for a few more minutes before Candy looked at the time and told Betty that she had to go run some errands and that she would get Alisa's swimsuit if she wanted. Betty didn't get up to retrieve the swimsuit and instead looked Candy directly in the face. That's when she asked Candy if she was having an affair with Allan.
She just came right out and asked her.
Yep, she said, are you having an affair with Allan? Candy immediately denied it. Maybe she said it too quick, but Betty asked her, but you did, didn't you? Candy confessed to her that yes, they had an affair, quote, a long time ago, end quote, and wondered out loud if Allan had told Betty. Betty didn't say a word, but rose abruptly from her chair and said, wait a minute, and disappeared into the home's utility room.
Betty?
Yeah,
Betty's
Betty.
going into the utility room, Tanya?
Yes. When she came back, she was holding a 3-foot axe.
What?
I know you didn't see that coming, did you?
I didn't see that coming. I mean, worst case scenario, a hammer, an axe?
And it was like a big axe, 3 feet, that you would use to chop wood. I'm not talking about a tiny one, like a handheld one.
Like a hatchet.
No, like a hatchet. This is one you have to use both arms to swing.
Wow.
A big-ass axe.
Betty.
She was holding it with the blade pointed toward the floor, and she didn't seem very threatening at that moment. So Candy was more afraid of what Betty was going to say, like more about the affair, than what she would actually do.
I would be scared shitless that she had an axe in her hand.
I'd be scared shitless if I was having an affair with some woman's man and she confronted me about it and then came back in the room holding an axe.
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about what the conversation.
No, I'd pretty much bolt.
Right.
Candy said, Betty? Betty replied, don't see him again.
Okay, I won't.
Candy had to get out of there. She told Betty that, okay, under the circumstances, I think I'll just bring Alisa home and drop her off after Bible school. She's like, I got to get out of here. Betty told Candy she didn't want to ever see her again, didn't ever want to lay eyes on her. So just keep Alisa and take her to the movies and bring her home the next day. Betty sat down the axe against a wall and told Candy she was going to go get a towel and told Candy to get Alisa's bathing suit from on top of the washer. And don't forget the peppermints.
I'm sorry. She just had an axe in her hand, and now she's telling her not to forget
the peppermints.
Peppermints.
Yes, don't forget the peppermints. Betty met Candy in the utility room, and her face had changed. She seemed no longer angry, and instead looked hurt. Candy placed her hand on Betty's arm and said, oh, Betty, I'm just so sorry. That's when Betty flew into a rage. She was like, fuck this bitch, right? She shoved Candy into the utility room. Betty grabbed the axe and told Candy, you can't have him. You can't have him. I'm going to have a baby and you can't have him this time.
Wait, I'm going to have a baby?
Yeah, what everyone didn't know was Betty was pregnant. Just a few weeks along.
Oh, my goodness.
Maybe even a couple months along, maybe 2. She was newly pregnant. As Betty moved closer to her, Candy put her hands on the axe handle. She said, this is stupid. I don't want Allan. Their eyes locked, and Betty tried to jerk the axe away from Candy. Candy pleaded with her to stop, but Betty told her that she had to kill her. The women grappled for control of the axe, and Betty jerked it upward, causing the flat side of the blade to hit Candy on the side of the head. She asked Betty, "What are you doing?" And she retreated further into the utility room. She touched her head and saw blood on it when she looked at her hand. Then she saw Betty raise the axe blade over her head, and as the axe blade came down, Candy jumped out of the way, screaming as loud as she could. She fell into a cabinet which held books and household items, causing them to spill on the floor. So I'm trying to describe for you, there's just this grappling going on in this utility room. It's a small room. I think it was probably only about 10 by 12. The axe blade hit the linoleum and bounced and cut one of Candy's toes.
Whoa, damn, this shit's getting real.
Mm-hmm. Candy's fear and pleading now turned to anger. Both women furiously grabbed and yanked at the axe. As they struggled for control, bumping into the washer and dryer and other items in the laundry room, each woman was trying to get leverage on the axe. Betty bit one of Candy's hands as it gripped the axe, and Betty lost her footing, and as her balance faltered, Candy shoved the axe handle into Betty's body with all her strength. Betty fell against the freezer, and she slipped on the linoleum, and Candy got control of the axe.
This is getting ugly.
I know. Candy raised the axe and brought it down on the back of Betty's head. But she didn't kill her.
What?
She wounded her, and blood came rushing out of the back of Betty's head. Betty slumped toward the floor and tried ferociously to regain her footing. Candy turned to leave the utility room, and when she started to pull the knob to the door, Betty came from behind and slammed Candy's body against the door.
Well, she just got hit in the back of the head with an axe, so how threatening can she actually be?
And she's bleeding profusely.
Wow. Maybe it's the adrenaline.
Maybe. Candy looked at Betty and saw blood spreading across Betty's face while she tried to pick up the axe again. Candy pleaded with her again, "Please, Betty, please let me go," which Betty said, "I can't." Candy seized the axe from Betty, and the women continued to struggle with it. Blood continued to pour out of Betty's head, and they were both covered in blood now, slipping on the floor, which was also covered in blood. The battle for control of the axe and the struggle between these two women continued for what seemed to be forever. In the end, Candy got control of the axe, all while trying to plead with Betty to stop. And with the final blow of the axe, she killed Betty Gore. She was eventually arrested for Betty's murder, and her account of what happened is what I've told you.
Yeah, I thought that might be
a little
Candy's
self-serving
account.
It's exactly what she told the jury during her trial. She testified on her own behalf. Her defense team would present a defense that Candy had suffered some unresolved childhood trauma that caused her to fly into a rage against Betty during their struggle for the axe. When Candy got control of it and brought it down with all of her strength, she no longer felt bad for Betty. She ended up striking Betty 41 times with the axe.
41 fucking times.
And 40 of them, Talia, were while Betty was still alive.
Betty got whacked with an axe 40 times while alive.
While alive.
Wow. I didn't even know that would be possible. That's horrible.
I can't even imagine. One side of Betty's face was just completely destroyed. When her body was found, Betty was laying on her back in a pool of blood. She was killed before noon, and she wasn't found until late that same evening.
Some unfortunate person had to find her that way.
Yes, her body had been found by neighbors after Allan had tried to call home all day long without answer. He had been out of town for work, and with each passing hour, he grew more and more uneasy when Betty didn't answer. He finally convinced a couple different neighbors to break into his house. They kind of all met at the same time outside the house, and they're like, "Hey, Allan called me." In addition to finding Betty's body, which was a gruesome sight.
Oh, jeez.
I'm going to tell you, basically, as I told you, half of her face was gone. The one eye that was remaining was open.
Eye that was remaining?
Yeah, because the other eye was gone because the side of her face was destroyed. And the one eye that was left open was staring down toward the gashes in her arm, kind of like looking down. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was just blood everywhere. I mean, there were pretty much every surface in that utility room had blood all over it.
It sounds like Candy focused on her head area, and her face, try to annihilate her. Mm-hmm. And you said she was pregnant.
Yeah, she was pregnant. And when the neighbors found Betty, they also found baby Bethany in her crib. Remember, the baby was home.
Oh, yeah. Don't tell me the baby is hurt.
No. Baby Bethany was alive, but crying, covered in feces, her face blotchy and red. She started to cry again, a hoarse little cry, which broke the neighbor's heart because they said, like, she basically had no voice left from crying all day for hours. When the police investigated Betty's murder, they first couldn't believe how someone of Candy's stature could do that much damage with a heavy axe. She was tiny. She was petite. She was about 5 feet. She was also a pillar of the community, a wife, a mother, an avid churchgoer. It was quite shocking to this community.
A great lunch maker.
Yeah. She was likable. The church stood behind her. Eventually, the truth of the affair she had with Allan came to light, and Candy's defense claimed she killed Betty out of self-defense. The childhood trauma she suffered would be discovered when she was under hypnosis, which was also presented at trial.
Oh, no. No.
Yeah.
No.
As I mentioned, Betty testified on her own behalf, and like I said, what I told you happened is what she said happened. It just makes me wonder.
I can't with this. Under hypnosis, her childhood trauma really surfaces? Really? I'm wondering if she just didn't snap when she found out Betty was pregnant.
Oh, maybe. That's a good point. It's possible.
I know nothing, by the way.
It's possible.
I need to find her inner child and kick its little ass.
There was this whole scene, the courtroom scene described in these articles that I read. And when her defense attorney confronted her with the axe, she cowered and begged him not to make her look at it. Like he's like, you killed her with this. And it was her defense attorney. You killed her with this axe, didn't you? And she's like, oh, don't make me look at it. Don't make me look at it. When the prosecution cross-examined her, they tried to find cracks in her story, but they didn't find any contradictions. Like, the story she gave was the same exact story. When the state rested its case on a Friday, the jury came back with a verdict the following Wednesday. Now, do you want to hear whether Candy was guilty or not guilty?
Do I?
No, you
Tanya?
don't.
Okay, then end of the story.
Candy was acquitted for murdering Betty Gore.
Wow.
The self-defense worked.
Wow.
I was shocked.
Unbelievable.
Especially since she admitted doing it.
Especially considering that she admitted she'd already severely wounded her with an axe. She could have stopped then.
And hit her 41 times? That's not self-defense anymore.
No, that's just destroying, annihilating.
I mean, she could have got away at some point. Isn't that the whole standard for self-defense?
Yeah.
Is you be able to get away? Not being able to get away?
Wow.
But I don't know what the law was in Texas at the time, so the jury acquitted her. She was tried.
They must have believed it was a truthful account. I mean, I wasn't there.
I wasn't there. Before I wrap this story up, both HBO Max and Hulu are working on this story. Elizabeth Olsen's going to play Candy in HBO Max's Love and Death, and Elizabeth Moss is going to play Candy in Hulu's Candy.
Is this some paid promotion I don't know about?
I am. Both are multi-episodes, so you'll be able to find out more. I'm sure you're going to find out all about that fucking affair. There's going to be episodes and episodes about it.
Wow, I can't wait to watch that.
I'm sure it'll be great.
Wow, I'm just so on fire right now, but that's fine. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I don't know what to think.
I do believe that Candy and Pat eventually divorced.
I would think. So Candy must have had a cut toe and
she did.
A bruise on her head.
She had a cut on her head and she did have a cut toe. She did. Her blood was found at the scene. I mean, it was 1980, so I don't know as far as DNA, but they definitely found her fingerprints on the axe. I mean,
it does seem unlikely that she would have came there with the intent to kill Betty.
No.
And have to go into a utility room and get an axe.
Right. I just don't see. Yeah, you don't plan a murder with an axe.
She must have just lost control when Betty came at her with an axe. I don't even know what to say about all this. Wow. Just two little simple
suburban housewives in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas.
Wow.
In the early 80s.
Fighting over Allan with an axe.
I know, fighting over Allan.
Damn.
I'm sorry. He's probably a great guy.
What?
I don't know. I know.
Where's Allan at now?
I have no idea. I even tried to find a picture of him. I couldn't find one. I found a picture of Candy and Pat from the trial. And, of course, pictures of Betty, but none of Allan.
I'm sure on our website, crimesandconsequences.com.
You can check them out. I am going to scour again to see if I can find any more.
We will search the bowels of Google for our fans.
I'm dying to see a photo of Allan. Anyway, before we go, there are shout-outs, Talia.
Love our shout-outs.
And in case anyone's wondering what I mean by shout-outs to members, you can find out more about becoming a member. It means you get access to exclusive episodes, ad-free episodes, early release, and all kinds of fun perks. We go live on Facebook.
Yeah, we have 100 exclusive episodes that are ad-free for just our members. And you can also subscribe to our Apple Channel podcast and get the same thing that you can get from patreon.com.
Yes, go to
TNT Cry.
Sorry about that.
And you can also get the same thing from subscribing to our Apple Channel podcast as you do becoming a member on patreon.com/TNT Crimes.
So,
are you ready to do the honors?
I am. We would love to thank Heather B., Amanda H., Jason Y., Gerardo M., Jeff E., Kelly, Allison M., Kaya, Margit, Lila G., Ashley I., Nicole F., Shanae N., Zoe W., Rosalie B., Bailey, Bijou, Patty S., C. Asia, Janine, Sarah H., Laura, Jasmine, Laura B., and Pebbles.
Pebbles. Love that name.
It's a great name.
And thank you guys so much for supporting us. We appreciate you so much. That's just like a whole group of cool people right there.
Absolutely. The coolest.
Absolutely.
You can also find us, everyone, on social media at Hardcore True Crime on Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
Is that all the business?
We have a new line of merchandise.
Oh, we do. So check that out.
You can go to crimesandconsequences.com and there's a merch button. Click on it and you can see our whole New Year collection.
That's awesome.
Inspired by true crime.
All right, Talia. Until our next episode.
Don't kill each other.
Bye.
Bye.